Yep.
Welcome to our live conversation today, Continuing Culture, Contemporary Indigenous Art, programmed as part of NAIDOC Week 2020, which celebrates the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm Diane Similis, the Gallery Curator and Coordinator at Glenara City Council. I'm very pleased to be introducing Kent, Paola and Gail this afternoon, but before I do, I'd like to invite Gail Yarraman-Steele to provide a welcome to country. Gail is a Boomerang traditional owner and the CEO of the Wundarwin William Aboriginal Healing Service. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for all of us, all of those of you that are joining us here this afternoon. Womanjeka Merambik Bunwurang Namda Barabdan Atawilam. Come with purpose to my beautiful home, land of the two bays. Speaking in my great-great-grandmother's tongue, the Bunwurang language, which is the language of the Bunwurang people, and specifically here in Glenara, the Yalakawulam and Narakwulam people of my clan. It is a privilege to be able to welcome you all here today. It's also a responsibility that I take on from my ancestors. And that word that I used at the start, Womanjeka, refers to the purpose that we're here for today. And we have to think about the purpose of NAIDOC Week. What are we doing here? Celebrating the achievements of Aboriginal people and the values, but also thinking back to its origins, the roots of NAIDOC, in our National Day of Mourning, and those that forged and created this day, people like William Cooper, Old March Tucker, Doug Nichols, to name a few, paying respects to those that came before us, that forged the way forward for us. Our purpose is not one so much of struggle, but utilising the platform that we've been given by those that came before us. And I do that here today. I would like to acknowledge those Aboriginal men and women on this panel here today, and those of you out there in the audience. I would like you to think about those people that made it possible for you to be here today. According to the traditions of my ancestors, the land where we meet in Glenara was created by the Bunjil, our creator spirit. Bunjil travels in the form of an eagle, and he also has his lieutenant, or his second in command, Wa, who travels as a crow, and he protects the waterways. But Bunjil created the lands and the people of this land, and he taught the people the responsibility that they had to take for this land. And in order to practice this, we developed our Wurangibik, our laws of the land, a customary system of laws that informed us how we practice and how we interact on the lands where we live and where we work. And to allow other people to come onto our lands, we had to ask them to adhere to our Wurangibik, to make that promise to adhere to these laws. Of course, in 2020, this is a really difficult request because it's not something that we get taught in our schools or our education system. The best way for me to give you a crash course in Wurangibik is by describing it from three different angles. The first angle is the angle of knowledge, or the pillar of knowledge. Thinking about how do we interact with knowledge and how do we value knowledge? From an Indigenous perspective, knowledge is understanding the responsibility that we have for knowledge. Not only the truth of knowledge, but the continuity of that knowledge. Ensuring our knowledge is passed down generation to generation and sharing knowledge amongst our community. Secondly, we look at community itself. We have two different aspects here. We have unity, but we also have diversity. And how we bring those two things together and celebrate the two things is a really difficult balancing act. It starts by inviting diversity into your groups, inviting those people into your collective group that think differently to you. You may not always agree with them, but they do strengthen your community. The second part is understanding the things that we have in common, because while we may all be very different, we do have our common purposes. We do all want the best for things. So unite under that common purpose. Finally, the last perspective I'd like to talk to is our connection to country. And while many Australians and people who have come here, whether it's 5 generations ago or you're the first generation to live here, often feel that Aboriginal connection to country is just for Aboriginal people. The truth is, we should all be able to celebrate the 80,000 years of human history that has occurred on the land where we live and work. And it starts by being curious. It's about being curious about the words and the languages that surround us every day, that are in our everyday speech. You know, whether we're going to Turak or Mullumbul Reserve or Moorabbin or Tullamarine Airport. You know, we're using Aboriginal language. We're often speaking the names of Aboriginal people that have come to pass on the land that we love and where we live and where we work and where our children grow up. What do those names mean? How do they relate to the places where I live? What is it about this history? When we combine all these different perspectives, we come up with something really interesting, and it might guide us into a better way of living. But it helps us to fulfill that promise that Bunjil has asked of us, which is to honour and respect the laws of Bunjil, or our Wirangi Bik. And when we do that, I can say in the words of my great-great-grandmother Pabanada Louisa Briggs, once again, Wominjeka, Merim Bik Bik, Bunwurang Namda Braptan Atawillam. Thank you.
Thank you, Garen. I'd like to acknowledge the Bunwurrung people as the traditional owners of the land Glenara is on. And our audience may be from the lands of other traditional owners, so I'd like to acknowledge them as well and pay respects to all their elders, past, present and emerging, and welcome any Indigenous people who may be joining us here today. Can I ask the audience to please start posting their questions on our YouTube chat, and we will try to respond to them at the end of today's conversation. Now, I'm delighted to have Kent Morris, Paula Bala and Gail Harradine joining me as special guests today. So a bit about each of our guests. So Kent Morris is an artist, curator and educator of Barkindji and Irish heritage, living on Yalukut Willam country in Melbourne, whose experience covers more than 2 decades in the cultural sector. Central themes in his practice are the connections between contemporary Indigenous experience and contemporary cultural practices, and their continuation and evolution. Paula Bala is a Wemba Wemba and Gunditjmara artist, curator, writer and academic. Paula's visual practice is about narrative realms and Aboriginal women's stories. A PhD candidate and Lisa Bellier Indigenous Research Scholar at Mundani Baluk, Victoria University. Paula's work focuses on sovereignty, matriarchy, resistance, and disrupting patriarchal and colonial narratives in public space. And Gail Harradine, who's going to be moderating our conversation today, is a Wachabaluk, Jubalik and Jadwajali woman, an arts practitioner and the curatorial manager of the Koori Heritage Trust, where she manages a team that cares for the unique collection from Southeast Australia relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people residing in Victoria. So thank you, Gail, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Diane. Yeah, my name's Gail. I'm Wachabolik, and great. You pronounce those very well. So it's not easy when you're on a Zoom like this, like to come up with that. So yeah, I just want to say, it's wonderful to hear people, respecting our culture in that way. It's really lovely. I'm from the Wimmera. I'm linking in from the Wimmera, and I pay my respects to all the mobs that we're linking in from. And I'm, of course, from the Wachabolik lands. We go up to the South Australian border and around the Grampians. So it's lovely to be home, even though it's a bit of a two-pronged sort of thing because, we've got COVID and it's not nice. But yeah, we're working around it as much as we can. And I'm very grateful to still be able to care for the collection, even from afar. And we do have one of our staff members in every day at the Korea Heritage Trust, allowed to look after the collections during this time. And I think that's really important for the community to know as well. And we have such a lovely collection, and I learn from it every day. I know a lot of other people do in the community, and we learn about our heritage, we learn about our special designs, the spiritual nature of, the people before us, and how they, reflected their own culture into all of our beautiful creative pieces. It's all there in the collection. And hopefully when we're opened up again, we can organise more tours or something of the collection, that sort of thing. It'd be lovely, because I think we've all been away, missing our culture a little bit. And I'm glad that, Paola's going back on country soon. I think it's all opened up a little bit again. So that's really good to note at the moment. It's certainly been an interesting week lately. I think, there's been a lot happening. So with NAIDOC as well. And I think, we'll talk a bit about that today, which is really exciting. It's the beginning of that week. And I know in some ways, we're thinking of people that we don't have with us anymore, like beautiful Lisa Belair, who was my Aboriginal liaison officer at Melbourne Uni. And, Paola's certainly, doing a wonderful job of getting through her PhD, and, that whole connection with Lisa through that, and at Victoria Uni, and and just the whole being part of NAIDOC, and being away from each other a little bit at the moment still as well. So I just want to acknowledge Paola, and thanks Kieran too for the beautiful welcome. And if you've got anything to say, it'd be lovely to have your input today, and Kent, of course, and love to hear more about Barkindji country too. And I think that's one of the things working at the Korea Heritage Trust, is learning about community mob and people residing in Victoria and thinking of country, and I just love people's artwork, and it was just wonderful to go through the artworks that we decided to use today. And thanks for putting up with me for saying about, maybe we could put the tram one in. I'll be in trouble, won't I? But it's really lovely to sort of, have that Korea sense of humour and work together on everything. And it's really special to me to be part of this. And thanks everyone for inviting me to be part of it. So getting into everything, in terms of the artist, Kent's just amazing in terms of what he has achieved. And I know Diane has introduced him, and but some of the themes in terms of the built environment with nature, and I've certainly learnt a lot just, looking into it a bit more, and I can't wait to ask a few more questions about all that. And also, Paola, about especially the Muk series. I know, we exhibited at the Korea Heritage Trust recently. It's only just been deinstalled, and it was up for a while because of the extension of everything because of COVID. But we went online with Affirmation, the exhibition, and that was certainly a big learning curve. I'm still getting used to being online, so excuse me if I sound a little nervous. But I certainly have really appreciated our CEO, Tom Mosby, encouraging us to think outside the square a bit with our exhibitions program during difficult times. And Affirmation has been a wonderful exhibition that was obviously meant to be up for Photo 2020, which is now Photo 2021. And but it's good to be up a bit earlier. And photography is an amazing vehicle. I know I've learned a lot from photography myself and other people's photography, and what we can, express in our photography. We've certainly had a lot of non-Aboriginal perspectives through the camera lens over time. And I think the Muk Muk series really resonates with me because of that domestic side of it. And I know my great aunt Clara, who brought up my father, Lester Marks Harradine, was a domestic, but very well respected with a local family in Dimboola, but that wasn't always the case. And over time, we're trying to make sure that women, are seen for what they contribute in the world. I know my great aunt Clara brought up the children, and photos show that she was really well respected, with them all milling around her as she's seated in a chair in front of them. And I think that's the importance of photographs. So, you can tell a story, basically. And so I just wanted to say that I appreciate the artistic practice involved. And in affirmation, I think having the Muk Muk series and the photographs was really pivotal to the other artists in encouraging them to actually get in there and show their work. And sometimes it's not easy, and to get over that finish line with affirmation was just brilliant. And the artist talks and everything, it was just fabulous. So I think that's part and parcel. We're always learning, and being able to engage with artists. As a curator, I find that really special. And so I just wanted to sort of say that from the start. I think the whole thing of sovereignty, matriarchy in Paola's work as well has a strong resonance too. And I think at the Koori Heritage Trust, we have focused on women's art quite recently, quite a lot. And I did say that to Tom recently. And so, we hope to have more about men's roles as well. And I think that's important. I know back on my country, we do a lot of weaving, but we don't offer as much for men. And maybe that's something, I need to think about more as well, because our men need to have their roles as well. So I was just going to start off with some questions, just, to get into the rhythm, and feel free to sort of, input as well. And we have some photos as well that are going to be shown during this. So my first question, really, just to start off, is reflecting on this year's NAIDOC theme, always was, always will be. Do you feel that there has been a shift to creating greater understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and culture through art? So I'm not sure if who wants to go first, but maybe Kent.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a crack at that one. But first of all, I just really thank you, Gail. Thank you, Kieran, for the wonderful words and the welcome, and thanks, Diane, and the City of Glen Ira. And thanks to anybody that's tuning in. I'm dialing in from the lands of the Elliott Woodland people, close to the bay, and very grateful to live here for, 2 to 3 decades now as a guest on this beautiful country. I'm a Barkindji man, so Barker means river. We are people of the river, and that river is the Darling River, Darling Barker, running from Wentworth all the way up through Wilcannia, Tilbury and Louth, up to my ancestral homelands in the north, which is on Gunu Barkindji country in Burke. Coincidentally, Elliott Willem river people as well. So born on saltwater country in the Woolgoolkabah and Bindala country in Townsville, ancestral homelands in Burke on that river, and here have the best of both worlds of the saltwater and freshwater. So I'm very grateful to be here. Are we getting a greater understanding? Well, yes, we are, but we've still got a lot to go. And of course, the activities around art and culture, so many fantastic practitioners across all of the avenues of Indigenous art, whether it's visual arts, writing, dance, performance, music. There's so much that's always presenting the stories and enriching the cultural life of this country. So many fantastic thinkers, and then of course all the on-the-ground activism and just local communities that have that storehouse of knowledge and that protection of knowledge and sharing of knowledge that Garen alluded to. So I think the idea around NAIDOC, and it's interesting how many connections we have to NAIDOC and the formation of that day. My great uncle was one of the men from Menindee, a Barkindji man, Hero Black, that were forced to perform that fake reenactment and none of the Sydney mob would do that. And of course, unfortunately, the men from Menindee were forced to do that at the threat of no food and rations for the women and children, particularly on the mission. And so that was every time I think of NAIDOC, I think of what that meant for those men and how some of them came back and were never quite the same around that forcing them into a false narrative, to reenact a false narrative. And so again, when we're thinking around NAIDOC, it's complex. We're making progress, but again, I think we need to really keep in mind that there's a long way to go and there's so many stories and narratives unfolding. But again, I guess to the centre of that question, yes, we are seeing developments and a lot of it's pushed through the arts. But again, the arts are an expression of all that build and that storehouse of knowledge from communities over great periods of time.
Paola, would you like to provide any answers to that one?
Sure. Yeah, thank you all so much. Like, this is really exciting. Forgive me, my Bluetooth was on, so a phone was dinging that is actually off, but through the magic of technology, it was dinging through my computer. So that Bluetooth is off now. Please forgive me. Garen, thank you so much for that beautiful welcome. And thanks, Diane and Glenara, for having me and all of us. And it is lovely to see each other, even though it's like you beautifully laid out, Gail. It does hurt not seeing each other and having NAIDOC as we would in July, but June and July. But thinking about the origins, like Garen, as you mentioned, and Kent touching on that, I was thinking about my great-great-grandmother, Papa Mariah Day, who was a Wemba Wemba matriarch, and she was a traditional midwife up on our Wemba Wemba lands, which is sort of where our matrilineal line is from, is like the Riverina country. And on our own, and my auntie Cecily Atkinson told me this story only a few years ago during my PhD research, that Papa actually travelled alone from Moonacalla Mission to Sydney, 26th January 1938, into Elizabeth Street, Sydney, for that very first gathering that day of mourning. So that's a 1,500 kilometre round trip for an Aboriginal woman to do that, who I don't think she had ever left the area before. Horse and cart to the train station and then to Sydney. So I think about her being a part of that incredible group of elders and old people who stood up for all of us. So I think sometimes with NAIDOC, it's always a feeling, a little bit of being bittersweet as well. Like Kent, like you're saying, it is for me, whenever I'd walk, and I've done this my whole life, when we walk in the NAIDOC march, and my whole life from Melbourne, when I moved down as an 18-year-old, onto Kulin country, and specifically Bunurong and Wurundjeri country where I am. As an 18-year-old, I started attending the marches. I grew up in Echuca on Yorta Yorta country and at Moonacalla, our homeland's mission, Wemba Wemba country, in between the two places, and a little bit in Kyabram and a little bit as we moved around, but the majority of our time was on our country or our relatives' Yorta Yorta country. So we didn't have NAIDOC marches growing up at high school and primary school. So to get to this big city, to hear about the big marches and to become a part of it was exciting. But in that marching, I would always think about the people that we lost, think about the reasons why we were there. It's not as straightforward as celebrating. For me, it's always been about commemorating. And and thank you for, acknowledging the late great Lisa Belair and her contribution. And I've actually just submitted my PhD on a week ago now.
Yay!
Yeah, and that was thank you. That was a creative thesis PhD. So it was majority by exhibition, and then I've just finished the written component. But I was very fortunate to be supported by the Lisa Belair Indigenous Research Scholarship at Victoria University, and Mindani Balak is our Indigenous support centre there. So I just want to acknowledge Lisa's family and Mindani Balak and the research office for making that possible. And now we have, I think it's about 8 Aboriginal PhD students at VU Mindani Balak for the very first time in our history there. So in that short, colonial history, but blackfellow history at the university. So it's really important to think about the origins and of the people that went before us. So of course, I'll mention my great-great-grandmother. I talk about my matriarchs a lot in my work, but also think about people like Lisa, who was also my liaison officer at Melbourne Uni back in '93 when I was that 18-year-old, just getting to the city and meeting all these legendary Aboriginal figures of the political movement in Melbourne that made things happen. And so I feel like I'm always just, walking in that path, and that just thinking about the sense of always was, always will be. For me, it's about remembering the people that came before us.
Yeah, and we do have the Lisa Blair collection at the Koori Heritage Trust too. So it is a very popular collection of photos.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, she's a great influence as a photographer. I think she often referred to herself as a documentarian as well. And she was a real community people's photographer. Lisa would take the camera and not just take pictures of people. She would get in the picture and hand the camera over to somebody and say, oh, okay, can I be in the picture with you now? So she didn't separate herself from who she was, documenting on the day or which community event. So for me, like every year, I think about, Lisa walking with everyone with their camera and recording gear down the streets in the city. And also that over this weekend, I think tomorrow they'll be launching the artwork for Warrior Woman Lane that commemorates Lisa's incredible legacy to the city and the country.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I guess I don't know if Garen wanted to contribute to that one at all. Yeah.
Look, I definitely haven't prepared for this at all, but I could definitely add, sort of being somewhat of a amateur artist myself, and working very closely with my sister Jara Carolina and what she's doing. Art's such an important thing. If we look back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of that sort of Aboriginal Renaissance, whatever you might call it, cultural revolution, where Aboriginal art was being celebrated. We saw the emergence of some really beautiful art styles from across Australia, most notably the Central Australian dot art traditions that have really sort of formed a lot of the sort of cultural identity of Aboriginal art. But sort of having said that, my belief is that reconciliation is based on changing perceptions of values. And I think that's what really NAIDOC is about. It's about value. It's about celebrating Aboriginal value in Australian society. So, art is definitely sort of one of the sort of most important parts of that, because art's something as all Australians, whether you're Indigenous or not, we can celebrate that. We can appreciate that. We can put it in our living room, or we can put it in the gallery, and we can go and love that. So there is great importance for art in reconciliation, I guess, or our efforts to reconcile, our efforts to bring up Aboriginal people, or at least help non-Indigenous people maybe meet where we are as Aboriginal people, because it's not always about trying to shift every Aboriginal people to where the rest of Australia is. In a lot of ways, it's about shifting other perceptions so they're more in line with our Indigenous roots and our Indigenous perceptions, and art really does that. So it's always it's a joy to see really, really great artists like Kent and Paola, and some of my cousins, Marie Clark, and that. It's always wonderful to see what they're doing and how it unifies everybody.
Yeah, that's right. I love Marie's work too, and we certainly have a beautiful collection of her work over time, and she's going, from you know, step by step, she's just getting up there and really making a name for herself, and you know, a great mentor as well, of course. Yeah, so moving on, when you consider that research and documentation about Aboriginal people has had a checkered history and largely through a non-Indigenous lens, do you feel that there is a strong sense of managing your own artistic direction and being able to influence outdated concepts of identity through the means of photography? And Paola, would you like to start off that one?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I'm probably slightly researched out, having just finished just on 4 and a bit years of practice-led research in my art practice, which can be a strange thing to do. I think I don't want to speak for other artists, but I know as an artist, sometimes it's actually difficult talking about your own work, and it's even more difficult writing about it. Even though I've done many artist talks and I appreciate them immensely, I think I end up enjoying the yarn with like people like yourself and Ken and Garrett, you know, other artists and the audience almost more. So you have to watch me, because I will sort of divert from actually speaking about my artwork if you'll let me. But I think it's because we're such connected people, and because our histories and community and culture is in our work, it's not separate. So, you know, I don't make work for... I'm not particularly making work for any particular audience other than my family and community. Like, that's who is actually at forefront in my mind, because I'm thinking about the legacy of how and what we research in our stories that we present through visual art. And you have to be very careful about what you do. There are protocols to respect, there are knowledges to protect. So you can't just tell every story or other people's stories, you know. So for me, I'm careful in the selections that I make, but self-representation is very important in that, you know, I didn't see myself in artwork growing up. In my high school art classes, when I would be drawing and enjoying it, and everyone would be saying to me, "Oh, you're going to be an artist, aren't you?" Because I had a talent for it. I wasn't sure. I knew I wanted to, but I don't know if I had the confidence to, because there wasn't much of us in the art that was presented to us, you know, like most kids. And unfortunately, this still happens now. Unless there's a really fantastic teacher who is working actively to put Indigenous art in classrooms in primary and secondary schools. And I sort of talk with my other hat on, because I lecture in education and in Indigenous contemporary art at Victoria University. I know from teaching for years to first year education students that they're not being given this knowledge in their classrooms. So the first time I saw Aboriginal art was in my family. It was my grandmother, Rosie Tang, who was a painter. She was a self-taught oil painter and a fantastic painter. My mum made things. My Uncle Jim Rose on our Gunditjmara family side was an incredible weaver, carver, very important elder. So, you know, I saw that art in our family first. So I think that's where you get the idea of researching and learning from elders when they're ready and they think you're ready to learn something. They decide to tell you. But I didn't see Aboriginal art that I really fully connected with through education until I saw Tracy Moffat's series, Something More, when I was in like year 9 in my art class. And I looked at her and I went, oh, we kind of look like her. Because not all black fellas look the same either. And we haven't got the same language or cultural practices. So I got really excited when I saw Tracy's series and started to think about self-representation through photography. So actually most of my VCA art subjects, which is back in 91 and 92, we were the first group to do VCE and some of the very first Koori kids to go through high school in Echuca at that time. And that was thanks to the efforts of our elders in our town, making sure that we were able to get educated because it had been denied them. But I saw this, so I started putting photography in my paintings and mixing up, making collages that, you know, very experimental, very young. But yeah, I think it's really important. And I think that Indigenous-led research is vitally important. And I think, you know, as an artist, you end up doing a lot of research. You have to. And some people, you might describe your work as research, you know, your art as research in a sense. I certainly tried to figure that out in doing this PhD. Probably raised more questions than answers, but that's okay.
And I do relate to what you're saying about being at school, and I think we probably only had a couple of books at school, and one was The Rainbow Serpent by Dick Ruffsey.
Yeah.
And that, and yeah, I used to wonder about that. And you know, everyone's families look different to mine. I'd go home and my auntie would be visiting and her hair would sort of be sticking up, you know, big sort of afro up here, and I'd be thinking, oh, doesn't everyone's family, you know, look like this? And I don't know. It's quite funny, isn't it, growing up and trying to work everything out.
But I think, if you don't see yourselves in the picture books that you read as a child, in the text that the high school teaches you, you know, when your high school is still telling you that Cook discovered you and that your people were savages, it splits children into a decision about what their life is going to be like at school for the rest of their educational lives, you know. So I think now seeing so many Aboriginal, you know, authors, children's authors and illustrators have their work represented, and seeing Koori kids grow up with books about them, featuring them, is so exciting and beautiful. And I think that's healing for them.
Yeah, it's important for well-being, isn't it? And,
yeah.
And that, the other thing I was going to say is there's been like a full circle with paint by numbers. Do you remember doing that? Oh,
yes.
Might be my age group. I never stuck to it properly. I was always abstract, but I did see it in the shop in Horsham just recently, some paint by numbers again. I haven't seen it for years.
Look, before you go to Kent, I got into a lot of trouble with my high school art teachers and primary school teachers because I didn't like being restricted to colouring in neatly and doing everything exactly the way they were doing. And I do think that was that strength of culture of being taught that things are more mysterious, things are more profound, and they're bigger than all of us. And we get taught to think really creatively and imaginatively, you know, as Aboriginal kids. So, yeah. Not fun for my high school teachers, but I enjoyed it.
Thanks for that. Kent, have you got anything to add to that one? It'd be great. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of things there, and I think one of the I guess benefits I see in, you know, of us being behind the lens and creating our own narratives is that you can really, as Garen's pointing to, influence and impact worldviews, you know, and try and balance up the differing views we have. There's a lot of the times you can see it really recently. The most, you know, pressing example is around the statement from the heart, where it's a culmination of knowledge and thought and generosity, and then it's presented as a specific worldview based in such a long and connected history in this country, and to see the reaction around that. So it's a big shift we need to make, and I'm always thinking about how to reshape, and I call it reshaping the debate or reforming how we see the world, and bringing in that idea of Indigenous sort of knowledges and philosophies and worldviews into that. And that can only be based, back to Pilar's point about research, and sometimes that research, and specifically for me, and from so many others, it's a combination. A lot of it's that really on the ground, lived experiences and histories, and if you've had disconnections through past government policies within your family, trying to refine and reconnect some of those dots, and learning things around the extraordinary changes that can happen, or the focus on specific narratives. I'll just give you one small example. When my father was born in Tibooburra in far northwestern New South Wales, if you go there today, and this has informed a lot of the work that I do and the research undertaken through my family history and family stories, etc., was if you get to the main street of Tibooburra, there's an upside down boat celebrating the failed mission to find the inland sea that was never there. There's not, in the built environment, a recognition of the extraordinary long history of Aboriginal people up in that far northwestern corner, and of the lives lived, the the trials and tribulations, the move to the Brewarrina mission that was done because non-Aboriginal people didn't want their kids going to school with Aboriginal kids. And that impacted on my father and his family and our family going back generations and split people up. So some of the informing around art from a First Nations perspective always includes a pretty high level of documentation and research from multiple sources. And of course, a lot of those sources are from the lived experiences that accumulate and are passed on and need to be shared and need to be greatly expressed. I think for me, photography's got a way where you can reshape, you can reshape, you can reform, you can retell, you can create that more specific narrative that challenges the narrative that has been so well worn and which doesn't give the entire story, the entire picture, if you'll excuse that expression.
And Kent, your work sort of is like it's one photo that you've just sort of manipulated usually. How do you go about it?
If we can pull up slide 3, I'm not going to give away all my tricks.
It was worth a try.
I'm not going there. But slide 3 kind of winds in some of the ideas. And yes, for me, capturing a moment on country and to understand that you're always on country no matter where you are, but to think and to try and, I guess, encourage people to think more deeply and more broadly about where you are and where you're standing and what might the deeper history or the broader history and, of course, the rich history going back well beyond 250 years look like. So this is just one example. I won't give it away, but yes, look, one photograph that's taken and nothing's added or subtracted to that one photograph and the image is just constructed from that one photograph. This one was shot on my homelands up in Broken Hill, and it's a very old colonial building which was very proudly celebrating the date of its build being 1880. Very, very big numbers on that building to say that. Now, interestingly to me, the Corellas, little Corellas coming in around Broken Hill and interacting with this building, well, for Barkindji people, the Corellas create stories around our families and creations and ancestors going back millennia, and the story connects of the two sisters, the two Corellas, linking back to the Magellan Galaxy, the two dwarf galaxies, one large, one small, the two sisters, one young, one old. And this story is so incredibly old, and it's something that continues through our culture. And so the interaction between a history that's there and a story and a native bird that's considered by non-Indigenous people through that entire area as a pest, but there's so many of them. I mean, I think they're magnificent, but there's so many of them because, of course, their lands have been reduced and destroyed, and they're, like Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal people, so resilient, so creative, so adaptive. And so there's a whole narrative going on around histories and the depth of history, but also around how we're changing the environment in a way that's not sustainable. And again, putting in focus the fact that, our culture is built on sustainability and respect for all things. And of course, the Corellas are a very important part of our culture and our storytelling.
Yes,
I didn't tell you how they were made, but that's kind of part of the process again.
No, that was lovely. But I do understand about that Corella's thing here. We hear shots every night sometime, sort of like a gun that sort of scares them off here at Dimboola. And because they just take over. They're just massive flocks, and it's pretty full on.
In such destructive, clearing and really aggressive and unthoughtful clearing of the land.
It's impacted on them totally. Yeah,
people have to understand while they're there, and then you find the correction. That's the message. That, too much of our natural environment isn't protected and being sustained, and these impacts are happening. So look, back again to the process, that interaction of birds in the built environment, to me, again, talks around a lot of narratives that we can reshape through photography and hopefully create, some narratives and stories that change the way that people are thinking and incorporate more ideas around Indigenous knowledges, philosophies and histories and the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, some really great concepts there. Just moving along, because I know I'm conscious of time. I know you both have a range of work and arts projects on the go. How do you balance this and keep strong in yourself? As I think all of us strive for that balance, but sometimes there's not enough time in the day. What are your thoughts on keeping strong as First Nations mob in challenging times? Yeah.
Oh, will I have a go at that? Do you want me to have a go at that?
Go for it.
I don't know. Look, sometimes I think sometimes it's okay to let yourself, not be strong. I think that there's too much emphasis on Aboriginal people having to be resilient. And I do really worry for our young people and kids in this continual language, particularly around education, that they have to be resilient. I think that the onus actually should go back onto the country, onto education system and health systems to actually be more responsible to Aboriginal people, so we don't have to be so resilient all the time because we're exhausted. So, but having said that, I think that self-care and the Black American poet and scholar Audre Lorde talked about radical self-care, and that can be an act of warfare actually for Black women, especially to take out time for radical self-care. So yes, those acts of self-care are important, like meditation, quiet time to yourself, having a lovely bath, those sorts of things. But sometimes it requires saying no a lot, because we do get a lot of demand on us, which I appreciate. I appreciate the incredible opportunities I've gotten. And so I think it's finding a balance between how we respond to those, because when I think about, before that conversation about our history and our origins, my grandmother Rosie was also a domestic when she was a very young woman for rich white families in Echuca. She had to eat on the back step of the house. She was not allowed to eat in the kitchen. Her job was to look after the children and clean. Her story, though she wasn't stolen, and we're very grateful for that. We've had family that were part of the stolen generation. But it echoes Auntie Marge's story of Black women's servitude and Black men's servitude in this country, and children's. So I think keeping that in mind, that I often feel obliged to do the work and often not say no, because I think if I don't share their stories, then I don't want my matriarchs forgotten, and I don't want their sacrifices forgotten or to go in vain. And not every Aboriginal person gets to, get public speaking platforms. Like, I'm very aware of the privilege that comes with this. I don't think I'm any better or less than anyone else in the community or any of my other family and community members that don't speak publicly, but I do feel a pressure at times to make sure that what I do is honest and that I work with integrity. Sometimes being honest makes you very risky, vulnerable, and it puts you at risk in the arts world and in public spaces. So you do have to be very careful with that. And look, I really also want to commend Aboriginal health services all across Australia and Torres Strait Islander health services, their work in keeping Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities safe from COVID to an incredibly high standard, the highest quality care, early intervention and early acts of protection for communities been phenomenal, and not enough people talk about that and what they've done. It's been world standard kind of work for local Aboriginal health organisations, the way they've responded early. When we look at what's happening to the Navajo Nation in the United States on Turtle Island and other First Nations peoples in Canada and the United States have been decimated by COVID. So as there are other, Black and people of colour. I think it's just finding a balance. Like, how do you do this work? It's not labour as intensive as what my grandmother did, but it's mentally very draining working in an academic field and the arts field. There's lots of the elements of art life that are lovely, exhibition openings and galleries and getting together with people. But look what happens in a pandemic. It all goes away. So you do really have to dig in and draw on the strength of I think of our ancestors and that what they went through was horrific and worse, especially materially in many, many ways. But there's still an incredibly long way to go, you know, for all of us. But yeah, I've been fortunate that I live with my immediate family, so we've been able to look after each other. But I think going for walks on country, Kieran, walking on Bunurong country has really like kept my spirit safe and well. Making myself go for walks along the river when I didn't feel like it, when I had to make myself during the last, you know, this lockdown. And as we all know, it's been very harsh for people in this city and surrounds. So yeah.
Yes, we have a different demographic, don't we? We've like we have less older people, our elders, compared to the broader community, and a lot of young people that are struggling probably at this time. Yeah, fully understand where you're coming from there. That's for sure. Kent, did you want to add to that one?
Or just very briefly, just pick up on what Paula said, and something that I've been very keen to express around, again, changing the narrative and around the worldview and incorporating Indigenous knowledges and philosophies. You look at who were the first people of our community, and yes, great recognition around the huge success of our community dealing with COVID and keeping communities safe, but the first members of the community that were highlighted and had to be protected at all costs were our elders. And for a number of reasons. But if you look at that in stark contrast to what happened, particularly here in Victoria and other places, now that's a real change in approach to worldview. And I think, again, something that around the narratives and around NAIDOC, we just need to incorporate these philosophies and worldviews more thoroughly through the entire country. And look, on that, my well-being, I mean, as leading an organisation and working on a program that supports Indigenous offenders and ex-offenders through an art and cultural program for 11 years, well, you know, without our elders, particularly without Auntie Carolyn and Uncle Larry and many others, well, I would have completely collapsed. But the knowledge and the wisdom and encouragement for me was around that I needed to be sharing my stories and maintaining and producing a cultural practice, and then well knew that I was involved in the arts, but I really committed myself to the process of supporting community through the Torch program. But without the balance, it is often creativity, cultural production, expressing and sharing those stories. And as Paul was very well mentioned, and I have the great benefit here of walking on this beautiful country and understanding that interconnectedness and understanding that it's not just your connection to people and to each other, it's your connection to plants, animals, you know, land, sea, sky, being part of something bigger than yourself, making sure that you're part of not only your community, but the ecology, that you're part of this. And that then puts you not only in a humbling place, but in a safer place. And so, yeah, just walks, that's good for your well-being, but walking with intent, you know, and the way you're kind of approaching that, walking on that place.
Yeah, lovely words, Ken. And also, we've just had a question just about some of your work, Kent, about the repetitive nature of the images sometimes. And I just thought maybe if we talked about the tram, maybe that would be really good if we could bring up that image again.
Oh, yeah, slide 4, happy to talk about that. So, look around.
Yeah.
I love that sense of repetitive nature and the symmetry that's in them. I talked about that trip to Tibooburra and where there was an absence in the landscape that, you know, my family and so many others' histories had kind of been erased from that landscape. But what can never be erased is the beautiful knowledge that's in the beautiful belongings and objects created by ancestors, and continuing today, that continuing knowledge, and also the stories and connections through people. And so it's that continuity. It's a sense that there is whilst there are disruptions, that's ongoing. And so the beautiful designs that inform a lot of what I do are around that continuation of knowledge and knowledge in systems and structure, you know, getting rid of this whole idea around the everyone nomadic, hunting and gathering, no system, terra nullius, there was no sort of organisation. It's complete garbage. The system structures, not only through kinship, but country and agriculture and aquaculture, all of these beautiful and in-depth systems and structures, to me, are reflected in those beautiful geometric designs and elements which are continuous, and always will be. And so that informs how the patterning, if you'd like to call it that, I see it as systems and structures of philosophy and knowledge, continuing, maintaining into the future.
Yeah, was it different to work on such a large scale with that sort of nature of imaging?
Oh, I've always wanted to do a tram. Didn't think it was large. I mean, you've been on them so much if you're a Melburnian, they're almost like your second home. So I just wanted that culture on the move, this idea of taking out into public spaces and making sure that these stories are always ever present, because again, I think as we've talked about a lot of times, there's so much knowledge and there's so much generosity to express and share this knowledge from First Nations cultures across the country. And let's just get it out and about everywhere. So I like the idea that you could see this, you didn't have to get on it, you could just see it. If you got on it, you're actually now part of that work and you're part of that culture moving along. Just that idea of, trying to bring people along on the journey to see things differently and to have a bit more courage, confidence and belief to understand that there is a wonderful system of knowledge and a worldview that's been in this country for such a long time, and we need to incorporate it more through our everyday lives across the country on a national level.
Yeah, it's brilliant thing to do, I'm sure. Amazing. It's really lovely. Thanks for that. Paola, how do you feel about the resistance, matriarchy, healing and activism, and as to these being key concepts in your work?
Sure, yeah. I might see if I can get slide 9 and 10 up, and I'll sort of talk to it in that way. These are works that I created in the first stage of my PhD research, and it was actually first shown. It's called Lovescapes, Wemba Wemba Country, and it was first shown at the Taranaki in National Indigenous Art Festival in Kaurna Country in Adelaide, and it was curated. It was a group show called Next Matriarch, which was curated by Yorta Yorta, very deadly curator Kimberly Moulton, and a white woman curator at Ace Open Gallery in Adelaide called Liz Now. And there are about 7 of us from all over Australia and some phenomenal Aboriginal women artists in that show. And we were all working towards that theme. So I think they're coming together with the commission for that show and thinking about what I wanted to learn about and go deeper into in the PhD research was starting with my standpoint and looking at where does that come from, where did I learn it from, who taught it to me, what does it mean, and to become as specific as I could in that. So it's more than just saying Aboriginal, because it's obviously actually an English word, which I don't relate to that much. I talk about being a Wemba Wemba matriarchal woman and a sovereign woman, and also a Gunditjmara woman through our patrilineal line, our Gunditjmara ancestors and Egan family. And with our matriarchal family, it's a Day family from this country that's depicted in that work. And so from left to right, it's that lineage of the photographs that exist, not all of our lineage, of course, but a bit like Kent's talking about that continuation, like our lineage continues beyond the frame, it continues beyond the edge of the picture, it continues through space and time, but these are the only images we have of our matrilineal line. And so it starts with my Papa Mariah, who I mentioned earlier, who went to Sydney for that day of mourning on Te Eora country. And the next image is my great-grandmother, Nanny Nancy, who was known and described as being the last full speaker of our Wemba Wemba language by linguist Louise Hercus. And then there's my grandmother Rosie, the artist I mentioned before, my mum Margie. So the images go from the early 1930s to the 40s, 1980s, and then to myself about 10 years ago, and then to my daughter Rosie. And so I wanted to think about the way that we're connected through each other. And so they're translucent acetate films, and it was hung in such a way that the work would move away in degrees so that you could walk inside the work. So then in number 9, in the slide number 9, you can see this triangular formation where you can sort of walk in between our country, and this is a specific women's place on Wemba Wemba country, and my matriarchs. And I wanted to sort of, I don't know, hold that feeling of what it's like to be held by country and matriarchs. And yes, there's so many stories there of trauma and survival, but there's so much love, like deep, unconditional love and strength that they give me and give my children. So I wanted to sort of figure out how would I represent that visually? Like, how do I do that through photography? So it's also acknowledging the act of collaborative photography. Some of these I was gifted by my late Auntie Walter Blow, my nan's cousin. Some are from my mum's family collection, which she very generously lets me dig into. She's got, you know, the old family photograph albums with the sticky plastic pages and the spiral gold, you know, spines, and they flip over and they make that lovely crunchy sticky sound. You know, when you're a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and photographs came in albums, and they cost money to print, and it took time, and you had to be patient, and you had to wait for the chemist to develop it. And most of the time all your pictures were blurry. So I think, you know, for Aboriginal people and women in particular, photography takes on a heightened importance about documenting family, the ones that have gone before us, the ones we've lost, the ones we're hanging on to, you know. So that's, yeah, what I wanted to do with that.
That's so beautiful because, you know, often you get told you don't look Aboriginal, or some of us do in our families. And but when you know, like when I look at my family photos like that, you see the family facial feature structures, you know, very similar, the bone structure in the face. And I mean, we look at each other and we can see it, but yeah, it might be a little bit harder to explain to others sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I've actually done an artwork called, you know, But You Don't Look Aboriginal. And I know many other Aboriginal artists have done that. Bronwyn Bancroft did that back in the 1980s. But, you know, that the other thing that it references that I don't explicitly say is that, you know, there were colour bars. In Lousy Little Sixpence, we see where Aboriginal children were selected based on their fairness to go into servitude for white people. So we know that the racial reasonings behind and the racial determinations about, you know, suitability being like closer to whiteness, very damaging to us, you know. And our Aboriginality is about culture, blood, connection, knowledge, lived experience. It's deeper than the surface, you know. Yeah,
definitely is. There's a lot to it, isn't there? And you know, I can fully relate. Like, luckily our family kept together over the years, but there is always those people that come back to family, isn't there? And you know, you want to tell them all about the family history, and photos are so important in that, and all that knowledge. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And I just thought we might just go to our last question, just to start finishing up. I just thought in terms of like, sometimes our pathways aren't there and we don't think ahead much as to where we're heading in life as Indigenous people. Sometimes it's sort of, or First Nations people. So my question is, where would you like to be in 10 years' time with your art practice? And do you think there are more pathways needed to get to where, you know, you might want to be in 10 years' time? Yeah.
Ooh, looking into the future. Wow,
we don't get to do that much, do we?
Look, I think I'll take the easier side of that to start with. I think there's so many pathways, you know, available that have been developed and keep developing, and it's really kind of critical, particularly for, you know, younger mob coming through, but through all the generations, you know. And there's so much opportunity, and there's so much, I guess, possibilities for our art, not only here and our sharing our stories, but internationally, obviously. And I was very fortunate to go to the University of Virginia last year for a residency and to exhibit the Unvanished series that was shown also at Glen Ira Gallery. And I was very concerned about how that work would be seen or interpreted, or would it make sense to people, given it was so you know, it was so tightly knitted into philosophies that are embedded in this country. But the thing that I learned, and I think this is the thing about pathways for our cultural practitioners and all people in terms of expressing broad views around who we are and how we interact, is that our story and our philosophies and knowledges are so appreciated on a global scale with a global audience. You know, American gallery goers and museum visitors were absolutely so engaged and drilled right down into the concepts and knowledges in these works, that I think the pathways are there to share our culture on a global scale, because some of the core elements are what we're definitely going to need, you know, on a global scale around sustainability and around how we see our place in the broader scheme, and in that, again, that whole idea of interconnectedness. Now, where I'd like to see it in 10 years, I have no idea. I'd like to just still be doing it, I guess.
A bit more of a global world. Yeah, like, you know.
Well, possibly. There's so much to do here as well. I mean, I think that sharing of stories globally is very important, but the sharing of stories is so important here because we still have such a long way to go to, you know, to bring this country along the journey of incorporating the worldviews that we have and understanding the experiences and seeing the truth in them and the generosity in them on so many levels. So I would just hope that I'm able to continue to create and share and be part of the broader community that's moving this country very slowly towards a place where we can all have respect and understanding, and particularly and finally get to a place where there's, you know, the 80,000 plus years of this country is respected, but also the 250 years is also opened, and we have a lot more honesty and truth around that. And I think that's, if we can be somewhere close to there in 10 years, I think I'd be happy. I wouldn't really worry about what my art's doing.
Thanks so much for that. And Paola, have you got something to share with that one?
Yeah, I really, what I hope is that I'm still able to be, you know, continuing to make work. I would love to be living up home on country in my own home. I'd love to own a home, and I'd love to have a space big enough that I could have a healing art studio for community, for people to come to, for community to come to you know, experience healing on country, you know, through creative practice. And you know, hopefully I'm still, you know, getting on the freeway and dropping into galleries, and hopefully people are showing me, you know, it'd be nice to be picked up by some more collections, but whether that happens, you know, I'm not super ambitious like that. I have dreams about well-being and healing for myself and for my family and community. I hope that there's less need to have to be continually educating people. I hope that there's less need for that. I hope people take more responsibility for that on their own. But I would like to have some grandchildren around me. Actually, I started having kids young, so they know. I tell them this. I'd like to have grandkids around, and nieces and nephews and family and animals, and a space for people to come and, you know, practice culture. I think as I get older, I see the value in needing to get home and be closer to country and to my mum and my other aunties, who are my other mums, to care for them and return some of that, and be visiting Melbourne, not living here all the time, even though I'm so grateful that I was born on this beautiful country, Garin, but I'm also needing to go home, and I'd like to visit and give space for mob that have given me space to raise my family on. And you know, Nauri Carolyn has been an incredible support to me throughout my whole life, and is a relative to my grandmother. So I've, you know, such deep respect for her and your family. But yeah, I think that's what it is. I think about seeing how we keep communicating these stories through our work, and I'm looking forward to the next generation coming up and taking over.
That's very strong and bold statement there. Yeah. To end with. No, thanks so much. It's been really, yeah, I mean, we could talk for so long, couldn't we? And, you know, still finding out more about each other. And but yeah, like, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and hope you have as well, and appreciate being asked to be part of it. And I was trying to stick to time. It's very hard. But yeah, like I hope everyone has a wonderful NAIDOC and yeah, enjoys this conversation as well. Yeah. I'll pass over back to Diane.
Okay, thanks, Gail. And thank you to everyone, to Kent, Paola, Gail and Gerin for your contribution and participation today. It's been a fascinating and really significant discussion. You've touched on so many important themes and concepts. So thank you so much for sharing your stories with the audience today. I've really enjoyed the conversation and I didn't want it to end. So thank you all. It's been fantastic. I'd like to thank Leo for his technical support, the Boomerang Foundation, the Koori Heritage Trust for their support, Melissa Bickford at the Council, and my colleagues in Arts and Culture, so the Arts and Culture team at Glenara. A reminder to everyone to please give us your feedback about today's online conversation. The conversation was streamed live today, so you can view the conversation on the Council's YouTube channel, on the Council's website. So please share with your family and friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a quick promote our next live Sunday session on the 29th of November at 5 p.m, the Gardens of Ripponlea Estate. So thank you all for joining us today and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.